Was I wrong for what I did to my parents, especially to my mom, during my dad's retirement ceremony? Tell me if you would have done the same thing, if you had survived what I did. I need you to understand that for 18 years, I didn't just grow up. I was broken. Day after day, year after year, the pain was a constant companion, physically and emotionally. It was a cycle of terror and despair, orchestrated by the man who was supposed to protect me, and witnessed in silence by the woman who was supposed to love me. The violence wasn't random, it was systematic. And all the while, the world saw something completely different. I was just a normal kid, living in a normal house with normal parents. But the truth was a darkness that threatened to consume me. Then came the day that changed everything. The day my dad's retirement ceremony arrived. It was supposed to be a celebration, a recognition of his decades of service. But for me, it was something else entirely. It was an opportunity, a chance to finally break free from the chains that had bound me for so long. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the earliest memories I have. It wasn't a happy childhood, not by a long shot. The violence started when I was barely old enough to understand what was happening. It was my father. He was a man of power and respect in our community, but at home, he was a monster. The abuse wasn't just physical, though the physical part was bad enough. It was the emotional and psychological warfare he waged against me, the constant belittling, the humiliation, the relentless chipping away at my self-worth. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was my mother. She knew. She was always there. I would see her, out of the corner of my eye, cowering in the doorway or peeking through a crack in the door. Sometimes she'd be crying, sometimes she'd have a look of utter despair on her face, but she never did anything. She never tried to stop him. She never pulled me away, or yelled at him to stop, or did anything to protect me. She was a silent witness to my suffering, a willing participant in the conspiracy of silence that defined my life. I remember this one time when I was about 8 years old. I had done something stupid, something that an 8-year-old does, like spilling my milk or forgetting to do my chores. My dad exploded. He lunged at me, his face contorted in a mask of rage. I scrambled backwards, terrified, but he was too fast. He grabbed me by the shirt and pinned me against the wall. His hand came down hard on my cheek, and I felt a stinging pain that made my eyes water. "What did you do that for?" He screamed, his breath smelling of stale beer. I tried to speak, to apologize, to say anything to make him stop, but I couldn't get the words out. All that came out was a choked sob. He hit me again and again and again. With each blow, I felt a part of myself breaking, a little more hope slipping away. And through it all, I could see my mother. She was standing in the doorway, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with fear. She didn't move, didn't make a sound. She just watched. And I realized, in that moment, that I was completely alone. The abuse became a twisted kind of routine. There were good days and bad days, but even on the good days, the fear was always there, simmering just below the surface. I never knew what would set him off. It could be something I said, something I did, or even just the way I was looking at him. I learned to be invisible, to make myself as small and insignificant as possible, to avoid doing anything that might draw his attention. But it didn't matter. He always found a reason. He always found a way to hurt me. As I got older, the physical abuse started to take a toll. I would show up to school with bruises that I had to lie about, excuses that sounded increasingly lame. I'd say I fell, or I ran into something, or I was playing sports and got hurt. But I think some people suspected. I think some of my teachers saw the look in my eyes, the way I flinched when someone touched me, the way I never wanted to go home after school. But no one ever said anything. No one ever stepped in to help. It was like everyone was a part of this elaborate lie, a collective agreement to ignore the obvious truth. I tried to talk to my mother about it once. I must have been about 12 or 13. We were alone in the kitchen and I was helping her with the dishes. I had a particularly bad bruise on my arm from a beating I'd gotten the night before. I looked up at her and said, "Mom, why doesn't Dad stop? Why does he hit me?" She froze, her hands stopping mid-scrub. She didn't look at me for a long time. Finally, she turned to me, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and pain. "He's just stressed, honey," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He's under a lot of pressure at work. He doesn't mean to hurt you. He loves you." I wanted to scream, to tell her that wasn't true, that no one who loved someone would treat them this way. But I didn't say anything. I could see the pain in her eyes, the same pain that was mirrored in my own. I realized that she was a victim too, in her own way. She was trapped in the same nightmare, just in a different room. Then came the turning point. It happened when I was 15, just a few months before my 16th birthday. My dad had been drinking heavily that night. He was in a particularly foul mood, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he lost it. I was in my room trying to do my homework when I heard him screaming downstairs. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew that sound. It was the sound of my father's rage, and it was directed at my mother. I didn't think. I just reacted. I ran down the stairs, and when I got to the kitchen, I saw him standing over her, his fist raised. He was about to hit her. Without a second thought, I lunged at him, tackling him to the ground. We crashed onto the linoleum floor, a tangle of arms and legs. He was strong, much stronger than I was, and he quickly overpowered me. He pinned me down, his face inches from mine, his breath hot and putrid. "You little piece of sh*T," he spat, his voice laced with venom. "You think you can protect her?" He proceeded to give me the worst beating of my life. He didn't stop until I was barely conscious, my body a mass of aches and pains. And my mother? She was just standing there in the corner, sobbing silently. She didn't try to stop him. She didn't call the police. She didn't do anything. That was the night everything changed. That was the night I stopped hoping that things would ever get better. That was the night I realized that I was completely on my own, and that if I wanted to survive, I had to take matters into my own hands. I started planning my escape. I knew I couldn't just leave, not with him still in the picture. He would find me, and then things would only get worse. I needed a plan. Something that would not only allow me to get away, but also ensure that he could never hurt me again. And then the opportunity presented itself. My dad was retiring. After 30 years of service to the company, he was finally hanging up his hat. There was going to be a big ceremony, a celebration of his life and work. I knew as soon as I heard about it that this was my chance. It was the perfect stage, the perfect audience, the perfect time to unmask the monster and show the world who he really was. But before I tell you what I did, I have to ask you again. Knowing what you know now, about the 18 years of hell I went through, about the silence of my mother, about the violence of my father, would you have done what I did? Before I tell you what happened at that ceremony, I want you to pause and comment below. Would you have sought revenge, or would you have just walked away and tried to build a new life for yourself? Think about it, because what I did was extreme. It was dramatic, it was calculated, and it changed the course of my life forever. I need to know if I'm justified, if my actions were the logical conclusion to a life of abuse, or if I crossed a line that should never have been crossed. Comment below. Now let me tell you what happened. The day of the ceremony arrived. The atmosphere was celebratory. There were balloons, banners, and a palpable sense of excitement in the air. People were laughing, chatting, and talking about what a great man my father was, what a dedicated employee, what a wonderful member of the community. My dad was beaming, the picture of a proud and happy retiree. My mother was by his side, smiling, but it was a forced smile, a thin veneer of happiness that I could see right through. I was there too, dressed in my best clothes, blending into the crowd, waiting for my moment. The ceremony started, and there were speeches from colleagues and friends, all singing my father's praises. They talked about his dedication, his hard work, his commitment to excellence. They painted a picture of a man who was larger than life, a hero in the eyes of everyone who knew him. Finally, it was my dad's turn to speak. He stood at the podium, a microphone in his hand, his eyes shining with tears. He thanked everyone for their kind words, talked about how much he enjoyed his time at the company, how grateful he was for the opportunities he'd been given. He spoke about his family, about how proud he was of his children, how much he loved his wife. He painted a picture of a happy, normal, loving family. And then he looked at me. "And to my son," he said, his voice choking with emotion, "I am so proud of you. I know I haven't always been the best father, but I want you to know that everything I did because I love you." I felt a jolt of anger rip through my body. How dare he? How dare he try to rewrite history, to portray his violence as some twisted form of love? This was my moment. This was the sign I'd been waiting for. I walked up to the podium. The room fell silent. Everyone was looking at me, expecting me to say something heartwarming, to give my father a big hug, to complete the picture of the perfect family. I stood there for a long moment, just staring at him. He was looking at me, a smile on his face, but I could see the flicker of unease in his eyes. He knew. He knew that I wasn't there to celebrate him. "You said you did everything because you love me," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I have something I want to share with you and with all of you. I pulled out a small piece of paper from my pocket. It was a folded-up piece of notebook paper, stained and tattered. On it, in my messy childhood handwriting, was a list of every single time he had ever hit me. Every date, every reason, every injury. I had started keeping the list when I was 12 years old, a secret record of my suffering. I started reading. July 14th, 20XX, hit me in the face for not doing my chores, bruise on left cheek. August 3rd, 20XX, kicked me in the ribs for talking back, cracked 2 ribs. September 21st, 20XX, punched me in the stomach for not eating my vegetables, couldn't breathe for a minute. The room was in absolute shock. I could hear gasps of horror, whispers of disbelief. My mother gasped and put her hand over her mouth. My father's smile had vanished, replaced by a look of terror. I continued reading, my voice gaining strength with every word. I read for what felt like hours, though it must have only been a few minutes. I laid out the truth, the raw, ugly, unvarnished truth of my life. When I was finished, I looked up from the paper and looked directly at my father. "This is not love," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "This is abuse. This is what you did to me for 18 years. And you," I turned to my mother, "you just watched, you never did anything. You are just as guilty as he is." I dropped the paper onto the podium and walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see their faces, their shame, their anger. I was done. I was free. The aftermath was catastrophic. My dad's reputation was destroyed. He was ostracized by the community, his colleagues, his friends. My mother, too, was isolated. People who had once been their friends wouldn't even speak to them. I, on the other hand, was met with a wave of support. People I had known my entire life, people who I thought had no idea what was going on, came forward with stories of their own suspicions, their own regrets for not saying anything. It was overwhelming, and it was also incredibly validating. I wasn't alone. I never had been. It's been a few years since that day. I've built a new life for myself, far away from my parents. I've found a good therapist, and I'm slowly working through the trauma of my childhood. It hasn't been easy, and there are still days when the pain is too much to bear. But I am healing, and I am finally living my life on my own terms. As for my parents, I haven't spoken to them since that day. I don't know where they are, what they're doing, and frankly, I don't care. They made their choices, and they are now living with the consequences. I don't regret what I did. I needed to do it for myself, for my sanity, for my future. And maybe, just maybe, by speaking my truth, I can help someone else who is going through what I went through and show them that they are not alone and that there is hope for a better future. Was I wrong for what I did to my parents during my dad's retirement ceremony? Tell me if you would have done the same thing, after surviving 18 years of pain and a mother's silent consent. What I did was a powerful act, but I was also just a desperate kid. And to everyone who's made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It's not easy to put this kind of pain into words, but hearing your perspectives on this truly means the world. I read all the comments, and your support really helps. Like this video if you were on my side, or even if you just think what my parents did was wrong. Subscribe for more stories where we explore the darkest corners of human relationships and find a spark of light. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did I do the right thing? I really want to hear from you. I'll see you all in the next story.